Hello, and thank you for attending the virtual book launch for my new book, In Your Face, Law, Justice, and Niqab-Wearing Women. My interest in writing about niqab-wearing women arises out of what I have perceived over the last decade to be a flagrant disregard for their basic human dignity and human rights. As a legal scholar, I was particularly interested in uncovering existing inequalities and preventing their reoccurrence. So my primary occupation with this work is to unpack the reasons given by the majority to constrain the actions of a small minority. While I don't have a particular anthropological or sociological interest in studying Muslim women who wear the niqab, I did think it was important to center the voices of niqab-wearing women and directly hear from them. Although these women have been at the center of many controversies in several countries, until recently, very few politicians or even researchers had tried to seek out their perspectives. So in this work, I conducted semi-structured interviews of niqab-wearing women in Ontario and Quebec. And to supplement these voices, I also drew on media interviews of niqab-wearing women, of op-eds written by niqab-wearing women, and affidavits filed in conjunction with cases involving niqab-wearing women. I am so grateful to the women who I interviewed for this book. They were so kind and open and generous with me. I was also incredibly inspired by their commitment and courage to living life as they saw best, despite the many obstacles that have been put in their way. So I thought what I would do is read some excerpts from chapter 1 of my book that documents these women's experiences and beliefs. And I believe that it provides some useful insights that really counter the widespread misconceptions about these women. Listening to the voices of niqab-wearing women. The vast majority of people in Canada, and likely most liberal democracies, have probably never met or had a conversation with a niqab-wearing woman. The meaning of the Islamic veil is recognized without any direct experience with it. And as a result, niqab-wearing women are a group about whom little is known and thus appear to be voiceless. The absence of data about these women has not, however, prevented the circulation of a great deal of mostly inaccurate information about them, as arguments hostile to the wearing of religious signs are repeated and reproduced by all sides, including feminists, secular activists, journalists, intellectuals, university students, conservatives, expert witnesses, ministers, and local and national elected officials. Politicians in particular have initiated many of the stereotypes and assumptions about niqab-wearing women and fabricated issues where none existed. Hearing the voices of niqab-wearing women helps to dispel some of the myths and stereotypes about them and complicates these women who have been portrayed monotonously. It also assists in supporting legal arguments with accurate and pertinent evidence. For example, much of the media attention has focused on the potential threat that niqab-wearing women pose, literally and metaphorically, to a variety of national values. The views of niqab-wearing women discussed in this chapter expose that the threat is in fact directed at the women themselves, as they experience frequent violence and aggression during incendiary debates. Similarly, decision-making about niqab-wearing women has been rife with unproven assumptions, often in complete disregard of the reality of a given situation, creating ineffective, counterproductive laws and policies that are at odds with fundamental rights and freedoms. When I began writing and speaking about the rights of niqab-wearing women in 2008, little empirical data existed about these women and their lives. I extrapolated that there were likely a variety of reasons why women wore the niqab based on the experiences of hijab-wearing women about whom much research already existed. I presumed that the niqab, like the hijab, was likely a shifting signifier, its meaning depending on who dons it and in what context it is worn. Fortunately, since then, empirical research has been conducted on niqab-wearing women in at least 6 countries. While this book is primarily about the Canadian context, debates and controversies about the niqab have spread globally, and I refer to and make comparisons to these other contexts at various points. General findings. Perhaps most interestingly, my observations coincided strongly with many of the conclusions made by others who have interviewed niqab-wearing women in Canada, France, England, Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Each of these studies reveal very similar motivations for beginning to wear the niqab, and strong trends can be seen in women's experiences of wearing the niqab in daily life. The predominant reason given for wearing the niqab was religious motivation, to become closer to God, though other supplementary explanations for wearing the niqab were also offered. All of my interviewees noted that they made the decision to wear the niqab on their own. No family member or other person compelled or coerced the women to wear the niqab. They were often the first in their families or communities to wear a face veil, whether this decision was made in Canada or before arriving in Canada. For many, the decision to take on the niqab meant acting in defiance of their loved ones or having to convince family members that it was an appropriate choice. All of the interviewees experienced negative reactions to their dress from members of the public, some to a greater extent than others. But most noted that their experiences of harassment and violence worsened during particularly controversial episodes in which the niqab received specific political and media attention. Each interviewee also conveyed positive encounters with people while wearing her niqab. None of the interviewees expected other women, Muslim or otherwise, to dress in a particular way. They believed strongly that one's dress was a matter of personal choice. Finally, all of the interviewees saw themselves as active members of their communities, rejecting the notion that the niqab represented a withdrawal from society or that it prevented their full participation in public life. Primary motivation for wearing the niqab is religious. For all but one of the 9 interviewees, religion was central to their decision to wear the niqab. This finding coincided strongly with the majority of niqab-wearing women in the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, France, and the United Kingdom, who also expressed that their primary reason for wearing the niqab was religious, to further their spiritual journey or to become a better Muslim by deepening their relationship with God. All but one of the 9 Canadian interviewees were born into a Muslim family with varying degrees of religiosity. Most of the women engaged in prolonged individual study to acquire more Islamic knowledge and to determine whether the niqab was right for them. Because there is a difference of opinion among believers and scholars of Islam regarding the obligatory nature of the niqab, many of the women used their own judgment to assess the evidence for themselves, keeping with the Islamic legal tradition of ijtihad, or independent reasoning. Mehreen noted, "I wasn't of the view that it's obligatory. I wanted to do it. It's like an extra prayer that you do. You do the 5 prayers and then you do the extra. It's completely optional." In Clark's Canadian study, she also found that though several women did not feel the niqab was absolutely required by Islam, they still wore the niqab as a higher or special kind of dedication to God. Zakia, who was initially inspired by a favorite teacher who wore the niqab in Pakistan, said about her decision to wear the niqab, "Honestly speaking, it was going to be an adventure for me. And I wanted to do something different, which is not the norm, and I wanted to be a little different from everyone else." Despite this rebellious beginning, she was advised by her teacher and her father to learn more about the teachings in Islam regarding modest dress. She eventually studied it in depth to justify for herself wearing the niqab on a more long-term basis. On coming to her own religious perspective, Aisha said, "So I felt like I had to do my own research if I'm going to understand this religion. Because obviously when you're born into something, you don't really have a choice in being Muslim or not being Muslim. So you have to go and do your own thing sometimes and think. If someone's going to ask you why you're a Muslim, you should have your own reason for why you're Muslim instead of doing it by the book." Several women used religious language to explain how they moved toward more modest dress, a headscarf, and finally the face veil. This series of steps toward the niqab was also reflected among interviewees in the Netherlands, for whom sartorial changes were part of a longer-term process in which piety became increasingly central to their lives. Clark also found that many women saw the niqab as a stage in one's personal religious development, and face veiling as a challenging commitment and test of faith. Alia, who first started wearing the niqab intermittently as an experiment because her mother wore the niqab, said the following about her reasons for wearing the face veil. "I'm a Muslim, and a Muslim means somebody who submits to God. And I believe that every time I put on the niqab, I am in a state of worship. Every minute I have it on, I am being rewarded for it. I feel I'm closer and connected spiritually to God, and I feel whole when I wear it." Another Canadian interviewee acknowledged that she received the niqab as a gift from a friend who knew the garment intrigued her, but that she consulted the work of scholars and put much thought into her own choice to wear the niqab. Significantly, each of the Canadian women linked the niqab with highly positive connotations. Several of the women spoke of being inspired or feeling enthusiastic to wear the niqab. One interviewee said it made her feel precious. Another said, "I feel that I'm complete with it on." These comments also reflect what niqab-wearing women in Denmark noted, particularly that wearing the niqab made them feel strong, honorable, and self-confident. All but one of the Canadian interviewees said that her face veil was not a message to the outside world. They said that wearing the niqab is something they do for themselves or for God. Fawzia stated, "Most people, I think, feel that we're imposing the niqab, but I'm just practicing my right and showing my emotions inside." An affiant in the constitutional challenge to Bill 62 in Quebec said that she wears the niqab to reach a higher spiritual place. She further notes, "Other followers of Islam have different beliefs, and I respect that. I respect other people's choices, even though these choices might run contrary to my own faith." Zareen also stated regarding other women's decision to wear the niqab, "I don't have a right in Islam to tell her that she's wrong. The perspective that the face veil represents a personal spiritual journey corresponds with the views of women in Belgium for whom the niqab was not about proselytism."